All right, welcome into another Gun Talk Hunt. Today's Gun Talk Hunt is brought to you by Timney Triggers, the world's finest triggers. Anyway, they got something good coming up. I can't really talk about it now, but in due time, people, they're coming up with some good stuff. Now, have you always found yourself out in the field, dressing your game out, and you sit there and you think to yourself, you know what? I'm just gonna take it to the processor. And you sit there, you wave goodbye to all this hard work that you've earned. You wave goodbye to it, and it's just kind of anticlimactic. It really is. And my next guest is dedicated to the last ounce of meat he gets off that animal, and he believes in preparing it yourself. And I'm going to welcome in our next guest, Mr. Rick Cary, CEO of CHARD. How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
No problem. No, it is, and I'm guilty of this. I'm going to be the first to admit right now. Beginning out, I did not have the funds to take my deer to the processor. I wasn't willing to spend $200 so upwards of $400 to take the meat to a processor and have it professionally done. And honestly, I am not a professional processor myself. However, I did all the work myself, and I got lazy. Is that about the same story you'd probably hear from 90% of people?
Yeah, it is. What I really hear from a lot of people is they didn't either grow up doing it, they're worried they're going to screw it up, whether they have the time to do it or not. Those are usually the big barriers for most people doing it.
Well, and that's I kind of call a little bit of BS on the time, because if you're going to invest, and this is something I've been thinking about ever since I figured out that I was going to have you on the show. I kind of sat there and thought, what are my constraints from processing my own deer and processing? I get it, taking off the bone and everything in the field, so that step's already done. I think the large portion of it is laziness. And if you hunt with me, you'll probably say, why do you put all this effort into it beforehand? And, it kind of just dies off in the end.
I can expound on this because I'm a big believer in what you just said. To me, a lot of it's a question of how do you view the hunt in general? And I grew up hunting for the concept of actually feeding the family, of providing, substance for the family. So the processing part of it was part of the hunt. It seems like pre-hunting is a much bigger deal today than it ever was when I was growing up. That's probably the advent of, game cameras that are out there. Just a lot more knowledge base that we can all tap into. But the processing side, and even in my memories of growing up, the processing side was probably the bigger family side of things, where we did stuff together. And I'm not sure if people are viewing a hunt the same way that we did maybe, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where we saw it holistically as from beginning to end, it was a process. And, some of the convenience factor of just dropping off at a processor, makes it a little bit easier. The processing could be a little bit, more the boring side of things. If you want to be outside, usually you're processing, if you're not outside, you're processing in a garage somewhere. So it's maybe not the same thing, but it is more a question of how you look at it.
That's a great point. So I look at it as a communal effort, because you get the family involved, and I'm always reminded of one season I was up in Canada, and I had shot a great elk, beautiful animal, and I sit there and I'm processing it, and I get all of it stripped down to the bone. And I've got all this meat, and I'm not sure what to do with it. Well, they had a commercial size grinder, and we all sat around. It was, there was, I think it was 6 to 7 people, just sitting there talking, and they were all family members that I hadn't been able to talk to in years, just because they're in Canada. And it was a great experience to be around, just chatting and just talking about the hunt and reliving moments as a family. And we're losing a bunch of that because, honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, social media is a little bit disruptive. And I think we love to go out and we take pictures out in the field, and then we, take pictures during the hunt. and then you hear nothing about it until it's all of a sudden on your table and you're creating recipes and all that good stuff.
If I could share a story with you, I was with some of my uncles this past weekend. We were just kind of reminiscing about my grandmother, their mom, and how when we would always do potato sausage. So, we had a potato farm, and we would make potato sausage, and she would, as we were, the rest of us were usually, basically peeling silver skin off, and she would be right there at that mixer and tasting, making sure that the balance is right, and she would eat raw venison and potatoes in the mix, and we were all kind of laughing about it because I'm like, today that would be just such a no-no to do that.
Yeah.
It was like that was the exact way that recipe worked out, right? I mean, I don't think it was written down in the card that she had, but we all knew that it would taste great as long as she was making sure every little bit of cumin and salt and pepper and whatever she was adding to it was done right. But we were reminiscing about it because these were great family events that brought us together beyond just the hunt.
Right. And now, how in the world did you come up and what is chard? I mean, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's great. They're making a lot of good points. But who is chard? I don't know if I've heard them or not.
Sure. So my full name is Richard, and I'm a junior. So my dad was also Richard. So my nickname growing up was always Chard or Chardy.
Okay.
And, when you start just a practical aspect when you're starting a company today, you need a website.
Right.
And that's not an easy task. I mean, everybody's bought up every website that's out there. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, well, it's, my whole mantra was make it yours.
Right.
And, so I was like, hey, Chard is a unique nickname, and Chard products made sense. And that's where it comes from. And actually, if you ever look at our logo, you'll even see in our logo, there's some kind of, we have, I'll tell you on the show, I don't think I've ever said it before, but if you look at our packaging, you'll see there's hidden references to Bible verses in our packaging. There's even my logo is the Trinity. And so a lot of what makes me went into this company when you first started, which is, I think what a lot of guys do when they first try to start a company and start up. I've been blessed and fortunate that it grew into something a lot more. But Chard Products was always focused on how do you basically take that hunt? How do you go on the field, whether fishing or hunting, and you take it to the next step? How do you make it yours? And this is what we're really talking about today is that processing it yourself, adding a little bit of more pepper, a little more salt, whatever makes it yours and unique. And then you're sharing that with your friends, your family. And again, I look at it as completing a circle. That's what Chard stands for.
Well, that's a great company intro right there. I mean, you do make it yours. And I do have a funny story to tell, a quick processing story to tell. Now, I've got quite a few of these, but one of my most memorable ones, it was my first trip to Canada. And I had been, processing deer on my own for a while. And I go up to Canada, and my uncle says, I shoot the elk very early in the trip. And I'm like, well, if I take it to a processor, I wonder how quick the turnaround can be. And he says, as long as it's this old Russian guy, he guy had to have been 79. He was still cutting meat and all that good stuff. But he said, if you can get it to me off the bone, says I can have it to you in, a day and a half. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'll have time to get it frozen, take him back, everything. I take him in my deboned meat, and it took me, I don't know, a little over half a day to completely debone and try to get it right. And I drop it off. I leave. I come back to pick it up, and he goes, oh, son, next time you come up here, you come to me. I'll show you how to process a deer. You are horrible. He gives me this whole spiel on how horrible it was when he got it to me. And I thought I'm not going to lie, I thought I did a halfway decent job, but man, he kind of ripped me a new one. I was kind of like, well, all right, I don't know as much as I thought I did. But you know what? I didn't have what I believe to be the necessary tools, not necessarily knowledge, but the necessary tools to get the job done. And I think that's where I see a lot of the Chard products excel, is that it starts you out ahead.
Thank you. Matter of fact, I'll tell a little story about this as well, and it kind of ties in. The When I first started developing, really the first thing I started developing were grinders, because you kind of you had two choices. You had these just El Cheapo grinders that were essentially disposable, or you had a Hobart, which is basically a commercial grinder,
Yep.
and maybe you could find one in an auction somewhere, but they were always still expensive. But there was nothing in between, and out of necessity comes innovation. I looked at that and I said, okay, I'm going to start designing a grinder that we can use, that actually does the job, that you can feel confident in using it, and you're not going to throw it out when you're done, and at the same time you're not going to spend $2,000 trying to buy
Right.
A commercial grinder. And that started the grinder really that was my first product I developed. And a couple of things I was finding is that the grinders that were out there were developed for the European market, and quite frankly, that market, they grind a lot of non-meat products. And as a result, these grinders were made a lot of plastic parts. They had, plastic gear assemblies, and just the components that held them together were inexpensive. And we would notice, we'd start at the throat of the grinder, improve that. And it seemed like every time we made an improvement, you just push the problem a little further back in the grinder until finally we just improved the cord on the way out. You just had to fix everything. But we developed that, and from my perspective, it was having grown up with this, what would I want to see in it? And I'm a creative guy, so this was a nice outlet for me. I got to create something that was a practical application, was something I'm very into and I enjoyed. And when you see our products in the grinder, it's just the first of many. But then that actually started a cascading effect, and I got traction with it with some of the bigger retailers, because they could see that this wasn't a product being developed by somebody who had no idea what was going on. It was developed by somebody who was, passionate about this particular category and understood what the common person using this was frustrated by. So, those developments, you'll see it in all of our products. I'll throw another example out there. We make a stamp set. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing my grandparents had a stamp set, and I think my grandfather had it made at, when they used to make stamp sets. And I don't think you can find somebody to make stamp sets anymore. But we developed it, and when we were doing it, I developed these little self-inking stampers. I developed a little kit for game processing. And what had happened in the meantime is we went from butcher paper to vacuum sealing. And I would stamp my vacuum sealed bags of my meat, and it would instantly smear off.
Right.
Or it would sweat a little bit, and you couldn't read what was in the bag. And the next evolution was, okay, we're going to find, a Sharpie pen uses a solvent-based ink. So we developed a stamp set that used a solvent-based ink, because that was the solution for it. Now that's something that, that's a great kind of parable of how we went through a process and said, yeah, we really want this. And when we used it, we're like, yep, that doesn't work. And we went to the more modern method of vacuum sealing and trying to develop a method of stamping, of keeping track of what you're processing from, my memories of 40 years ago.
Right. And it's the evolution, and it's how you use the product is because when it works, it's awesome. I'm going to pause real quick to pay some bills and keep the lights on here. But today's Gun Talk is brought to you by Timney Triggers. Timney Triggers has been making affordable quality triggers in the U.S. since 1946. Every month, Timney highlights a trigger of the month and offers you a chance to win one. This month, it's the Mossberg LBA short action trigger, factory calibrated to be ready to shoot out of the box. It's adjustable for creep and pull weight. Enter now at timneytriggers.com. Also, Gun Talk Hunt is brought to you by Springfield Armory. Springfield's model 2020 Waypoint bolt action rifle is one sweet shooting gun. If you haven't seen our antelope video, I suggest you go over there because this sucker shoots. But with the option of steel or carbon fiber barrel, 5 QD mounts, and a .75 MOA. Yes, you heard that correctly. .75 MOA accuracy guaranteed. You can find more at springfield-armory.com. Check it out now. So going back on the innovation of like using products and innovation from, old packaging where it's in the paper or the wax paper and stuff like that into now vacuum sealed. That's a very big thing. I think the evolution of, and maybe there's quite a few people out there who are doing it already, is the gutless method of cleaning a deer, where you don't have to actually gut a deer. That's an evolution, but you're missing some meat in there. But that's an evolution too that I've only recently come to enjoy.
Yeah, and I gotta be careful because I get trapped in my ways, right? I think we all do. I don't think as you're saying this, I'm like, no, you don't do that.
I know. That's the problem is you're losing some very, very important items. You're leaving some behind.
Yeah,
but it's so easy.
You're leaving some behind, and depending on what what part of the country you're in as well, there's all kinds of reasons you wouldn't want to do that. But
that's true.
At the same time, it is a method that people are using. They're using safely. It's not my preferred method or how I do it, but like I said, I gotta be careful you don't get caught in
right.
We've always done it that way type
right.
of mantra. Yeah.
So I have a question for you and for our listeners out there. What do you believe is the most, like, I don't want to say underutilized, but often forgotten piece of meat in an animal that people just brush off to the side? I've got one already in mind. I'm going to see if it matches up with yours.
My personal favorite piece of meat that's left behind is on a younger deer, the hind quarter just above the kneecap on the back. That is an incredibly tender piece of meat right there that I find almost everybody grinds or turns into a simple roast.
Okay,
that can be turned into a nice steak.
Okay, so now on the hindquarters?
On the hindquarters, right.
Okay, right behind the kneecap. How
right above the kneecap and
right.
on the back, yeah.
Okay, and you're turning that into a steak?
Yeah, I'm doing so. I'm turning it into a steak, cutting cross grain.
Okay,
and then but it doesn't work. I've tried it both ways. It's like if you're on a younger deer, that work. It's a nice piece of meat. You get to an older deer, seen a couple winters, it could get tough.
Right.
But on a younger deer, that's a really nice piece of meat. I mean, everybody goes for back straps and tenderloins. Of course, that there's you want to be real careful about how you take those out and savor every piece that you get out of there. But that's one, and I'll give credit to my grandfather. It seemed like every deer season at some point in the season we would be eating that particular steak out of the cast iron fry pan at camp.
Ooh.
So I probably have a little bit of a preference for it because of that.
That's probably right. Now, okay, ours did not line up at all. I didn't know you were going, hind quarter, kneecap. I didn't know you were going that specific. Mine's the heart. Mine's 100% the heart. That most guys,
yep.
when they're gutting, they just sling it to the side and that's it. And I think a lot of that is just they're scared of the organ meat.
Organ meat in general scares people because whether you eat it without being wild game or not, it dictates whether you do it in your wild game.
Right.
If you're a guy who eats heart, tongue, anything else of that, organ meat in general, I don't think you have a big problem with it, but humans are creatures of habit.
They are, and that's often tossed to the side. But one of my favorite ways, and I kind of liken it to like has a kind of a roast kind of texture to it when you do it this way. But I'll stuff it with like a stuffing after cleaning it up good, getting all those tendons out of the heart and making sure it's clear. But and you guys sell a bunch of stuff that's actually really helpful with this, and it's the cord. But I'll stuff it with a stuffing, put in a gravy mix like an au jus mix and a ranch dressing packet, a little bit of beef broth, and then put it in a slow cooker. Cook it for 12 hours. Man, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and that would have been my suggestion on how to cook it. The only thing that you're missing is a can of cream mushroom soup. But, I think that goes into everything I cook. So just take that with a grain of salt.
So you're a big fan of the cremo mushroom?
My wife hit me up the other day. She's like, "Why do we have 50 cans of cream mushroom soup?" I'm like, "It doesn't go bad, and it makes everything taste good."
Well, it's delicious. You can't. Do you eat everything that I cook? Yes, you do. So I have a question. Right. So you're married. So does your wife enjoy cooking wild game?
In my family, I'm the cook when it comes to stuff like that. I enjoy the whole process, and plus I do it every day. It's my life. So I enjoy cooking because I like seeing what when I try something new. How does it turn out? again, closing that full circle, I like the cooking aspect of it too. So I'm usually the guy cooking wild game, but my wife grew up in a similar family. She's highly capable of doing it as well. It just so happens that it's usually me trying to do something different.
So what would you say your specialty is? If your family had to sit there and they said, hey, we want you to cook X, what are they asking for? And how do you cook it?
You know, that's a great question. Honestly, probably potato sausage. I mean, that's probably, because there's a whole process to that and how I cook it. And I don't have something that's my go-to other than probably potato sausage, because I grew up on it, and that's pretty much a staple for us. But otherwise, you know, I'm in that world where, you know, I know a lot of guys who try different things, who, you know, have different recipes, and every chance I get, I try something new. So I would say that's probably what my family would say, is that Dad's always trying something different. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. You know, and you know, and even when, I'm sure you're like this too. You know, you trade out some meat with somebody. Hey, a buddy of mine got a bear, and we're going to try doing, you know, some different things with bear today. And
bear's
so
a tough one.
You know, it is, and some people love it, some people hate it, and that's one I just brought up because I did that not too long ago with my family, and my kids didn't like it. My wife liked it. I liked it, but probably won't happen again because of that.
You got to cook something that everybody kind of enjoys. Bear is one of those real tough ones because I found that if they've been eating a lot of fish, they are no good. That it's just oily. The meat's just not very good. But if they've been eating berries or oats, forage and stuff like that, really good. But bear's just a tricky one. My wife just doesn't really enjoy antelope, and I don't know why. I kill one every year for her. I could say it's for her. It's really for me.
You know, with antelope though, I think if you could figure out something that, you know, that strong sage flavor, if you can, you know, tap into some seasonings that thymes and things like that really go well with sage, that they have such that natural flavor already. Look to complement it, not mask it. I do the same thing because I same way, get antelope relatively often, and you know, I've tried the Taco Tuesday type stuff where you take the ground antelope and make tacos out of it, and you add enough taco seasoning, and hopefully you're overcoming that. I say don't fight it, go with it. Try to find seasonings that, you know, that rosemary, you know, goes really well with sage. Try those types of approaches and complement it. Don't fight it.
You're about embracing it. Just embrace it. Just warm up to the fact that it's going to taste like sage, and there's not a bunch you can do.
Exactly. And, you know, they're relatively small animals, so you go through the meat pretty quickly. So
that is a good point. That is a very good point. So what's the one meat that you would say, yeah, it's just not my favorite?
You know,
and you can't say groundhog.
Yeah. I was shooting guys this weekend doing squirrel, and we were shooting some squirrel, and I'm not a huge squirrel fan. I know guys love it. It's just not for me.
I would tend to agree with you. I would say mine, I tried coyote once, and it's not very good. I don't recommend
never
it.
Never tried coyote. No,
I don't recommend you doing it.
No. Well, you kind of look at what, you know, back to even bear, and look at what they're eating and what dictates. I'm from Wisconsin, and you know, here most bear is shot over a bait pile that you've taken, you know, day-old donuts for the last 6 months and put together. Bear tastes fantastic. It's been eating, you know, donuts for 6 months. So but, you know, you get bear eating fish, and
and it's not good. So so here's a hint to everybody: whatever you want to like pre-season your animals with, just go ahead and feed them that. Like, I want this to have a little hint of blueberry to it. So just feed them blueberries the whole time.
They'd be the healthiest deer out there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Or feed them blueberry donuts. I guess that's another. So you get a little bit of sweet.
The best of all worlds.
Oh my gosh, that's great. So what was the one? I was wondering about this before. What was the moment that you said, you know what, screw this, like I've got to come up with something better. There's got to be a better way. Were you out in the field and your equipment wasn't working, or you just thought to yourself, like, I'm just kind of, I'm done with this way. I need to move something better?
Yeah, I think really for me what it was, previous to this career, I was a lawyer. I wasn't real thrilled with that career, and I like being outdoors a lot more. And CWD was a big deal that was kind of moving across the country at the time, and started in the Colorado area, was moving to the Midwest. And that actually, I was noticing that processors that I knew were shutting down because of some of the regulations that were required for moving from wild game back to being certified for doing beef and other animals. And I saw an opportunity that where basically something was changing, and it was inevitable. We couldn't stop it, so that it was going to have this downstream effect. And I saw an opportunity for me to combine what I'd grown up with, what I enjoyed, with a market opportunity of what was coming, and a fundamental shift within our industry. And I took that leap, and a little backstory for this. I was general counsel for a company. I went to my wife and I said, I really want to go do this. I have an idea for a grinder. I think I can develop this. This can be something. And I said, but most of these things don't work out. And
Right.
she's like, it'll be okay. She said, we've lived on, nothing before. And I said, you're right. So that year I went out, I shot 2 deer that year. We planted a garden. I did early season, late season, and I processed absolutely everything. And it was not just for development of the grinder, but I'm like, well, this is great. I have food to last for the next 9 months. I'm in good shape. And it all kind of came together at the time. And it was right kind of just before the recession hit. So it was right into the recession, which you would have thought would be just sort of like the death call for me.
Oh, absolutely.
But what it ended up doing, it shifted our industry, and people saw it and said, you know what, I don't want to be as dependent on the system. I want to know I can do it myself. And I see that even today with the pandemic, and people are getting back to saying, yeah, I want to be able to do it myself. And I'm even seeing that culture within fishing, hunting, of saying, I want to understand, I know keep coming back to that, closing that circle, but maybe I was just sport hunting. I was still eating my game, but I was leaving out an essential part of that. And now I realize that, I really want to know how to do the whole thing.
Right.
And that's helped, our particular industry quite a bit. I mean, we've had, strong sales, strong year. And I attribute it to, again, going back to that concept of people wanting to know how to do it all, be self-sufficient and not dependent on others. And there's a lot of categories for this. Ours just happen to be benefited from that.
That's great. And now tell folks where to go to find out more, because we're nearing the end of our podcast, unfortunately, but you guys have resources for folks to learn how to do this and how to get set right. Where would they go to find all that?
Yeah, chardproducts.com, CHARD products.com is our website. That's a non-e-commerce website. So, our website is really focused on the educational aspect. We've got our products are found at most of your major retailers. You won't have too many problems going out there and finding them. But if you want to get into it, you don't know where to start, Chard Products is a great place. We have other references within our website. And I encourage you to go out and do as much research as possible. You're researching your new cell phone game camera preseason, research how to process after the season. Yeah. That's half the fun, I think, for a lot of us, is getting that knowledge base put together. And chardproducts.com is a great place to start. And
it really is. And they've got stuff for meat processing, outdoor cooking, food preparation. If you've got to have it, they have it. I mean, if you need it, they've got it. And I was looking on, and you guys are selling across Amazon, and so that's a great way. So if you're listening to this right now and you've got a hunter or you've got an outdoorsman in your life, head over there, grab some Chard products for them. You won't be disappointed. But the man from Chard himself, I guess, would we call you Mr. Chard? How would we call you? Just Chard?
You'd be the first to call me Mr. Chard.
All right, I like that.
Hey, I could go by Chardy. Call me Chardy. I'm happy to say hello.
All right. Well, Chardy, thank you so much for joining us on Gun Talk Hunt. And if you guys are out there within earshot, if you're watching this on YouTube, give them a look. That's chardproducts.com, and hunt safely.